There's no such thing as an objective measure of wealth. Everything is just relative to the other person next to you. Any business endeavor and any investing endeavor, what you're really getting paid for is to put up with uncertainty and pain. Save your money like a pessimist and invest your money like an optimist. Like, save your money with the idea that the world's really fragile and you might lose your job next week. You might get divorced next year. One day a week that I'm actually typing words out. Really? And the rest of it is just kind of unstructured, hanging out, reading, thinking, talking to friends. And that's where the real work happens. There's no such thing as an objective measure of wealth. There's no such thing as once you have X dollars, everything will be okay. Everything is just relative to the other person next to you. How much do I have relative to you, relative to that person? So in a world where things tend to get better for most people, not everybody, but we tend to get richer over the generations. Well, if you're just comparing yourself to your peers, then if you get richer, but your peers do as well, you went nowhere. So the average median income adjusted for inflation has doubled since our grandparents' generation.
Really? Adjusted
for inflation. But we don't feel any better off at all because now, look, we're living in bigger houses, driving nicer cars, but so are our peers. Easily imagine a world in which our grandkids are living twice as well as us, and they don't feel any better off either. It's all because you're comparing, and it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Like, it doesn't matter how many resources I have. What matters is that I have more than you. There's that joke about, like, there's two hikers being chased by a bear, and then one of the guys starts running, and his friend says, "You idiot, you can't outrun a bear." And his friend says, "I don't need to outrun the bear, I just need to outrun you." And that's money too. That's what it is. And so it really is, it's a sad thing to ponder that you can live in a world where everything gets better and you don't appreciate any of it because you expected all of it. But it's happened forever, and I think it will happen forever. There's the Chris Rock joke where he says if Bill Gates woke up with Oprah's money, he'd jump out the window. Because who is a billionaire comparing himself to? Other billionaires. That's it. And like, I've also thought about the minimum wage in Major League Baseball, I think is $500,000. By any metric, a lot of money. But do you think the guy who's playing for the Yankees making $500K feels like he's crushing it? No, he's playing with all his peers who are making 10, 20, 30 million a year. So even if by any definition he's in the tippy top of income, you don't feel like it. Top things that make people broke. Number one, the most important. This might seem like a cop-out of an answer. It's they don't have enough luck. I mean, that's so much of it. I know so many people who would disagree with that statement. So if you do disagree with that, I get it. But I think, like I said earlier, in any kind of extreme success, even mine, and I would venture to say yours too, if you're really honest about connecting the dots in the past, you would say that there's this thing that happened to me that I never planned on. I did not strategize this. It just kind of happened to me. As I said, even if that thing is you were born in the right era.
Right.
And so that's a big part of it that I think is too easy to ignore. The second is, I think, some form of short-termism, whatever it is. Great story from Mr. Beast recently where he said, when people who have YouTube channels come to him for advice, and I'm sure a lot of them do, he tells everybody the same thing. He says, go make 100 videos and then come back to me. And he said that 99 of those people will give up before they make 100 videos. And so I think but the fact that 99 of them gave up is, I mean, that's really what it is. It's just like, do you have the endurance, if not stubbornness, to keep it going? In any business endeavor, in any investing endeavor, what you're really getting paid for is to put up with uncertainty and pain. And most people they realize that they're going to cry uncle sooner than they thought. And that's okay. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed. The people who don't make it are the ones or the people who do make it are the ones who are just like, I have such a high tolerance for pain. Mm-hmm. I've heard this about Navy SEALs too, that when Navy SEALs start, you got the big, burly, 6'4", bulging guys. And then you got the skinny little guys who are like 5'7" and kind of pudgy. There is no telling early on which one of those people are going to make it, because what actually is going to help you to make it, to actually get to the finish line, is just your tolerance for pain. Okay. And the scrawny guy might have a super tolerance for pain. I remember when Obama met the Navy SEALs who killed bin Laden, he had this comment where he was like, I was stunned. He said half of them could have been like high school principals, but their tolerance for pain was off the chart, and that's why they got where they were. And I think that's a great analogy for people who make it in business and investing in any career. I would put them in those order, in that order of what it is. Before I wrote a book, I wrote 3,500 blog posts over the course of 17 years.
Right.
Of those 3,500, I think 3,000 of them sucked. And I would admit that they sucked. So the pain and the endurance that it took to get to that point where I was like, okay, now I think I'm ready to write a book. And I probably could have written a book after year 5 or something, but it wouldn't have been very good. To get to a point where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to do this, was 17 years of writing every single day. I see this a lot with new bloggers as well, where they'll be like, I started a blog and I wrote 2 posts and nobody read it, so I gave up. And by the way, if you can keep that up, people are going to tell every day, they're going to tell you how dumb you are, how bad of a writer you are. Maybe it's like, no, keep going and you'll get there, versus like, hey, this isn't your thing. You should quit and give up. I think there have been things in my life where I was stubborn and not patient. There have been other things where I look back and I'm like, oh, I was appropriately patient. But other things, it's like, man, I wish I would have kind of quit before that, particularly like different styles of writing that I've experimented with. I'm definitely a worst case scenario thinker. And I definitely, including recently this week, can become kind of wrapped up in stress and anxiety. Virtually everyone listening to this has some degree of that. Mine's probably a little bit above average. But definitely when I look back, if I could tell myself something 20 years ago, if I could go back to 20-year-old Morgan and say something, I would be like, it's all going to work out. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun all the time, but it's all going to work out. And I look back at most of my adult life and I'm like, man, I wish I had just lightened up a little. Including, like I said, this week, wake up at 2 a.m. fretting about something. And to an extent, I think that's good, because I think without an appropriate level of stress is a motivator. And stress is like, hey, there's a problem. How can I fix it? How can I nip this in the bud? So some stress is great, but of course you can overdo it. And that's my weakness, blowing things out of proportion. I think it's not even professionally, but I think there's situations where it's like, I could have and should have been nicer to that person and more empathetic to that person. And usually it's like, it's pretty subtle, but it's like a friend of mine was suffering and I just kind of said, oh, sorry to hear. I should have at least called them another time or helped them or opened a door for them. And I think that's a regret looking back. A lot of that is because what are you proudest of in life looking back? It's like, at least for me, it's not selling books or making money. It's like, and you mentioned this earlier, am I helping people? Am I actually doing something that's worthwhile in the world? Did I actually use my time on earth to leave it a little bit better than I found it? And I think if you look back and you realize that you could have been more helpful to more people, that's like, I think regret's maybe a wrong word, because like at the time I didn't mean any harm. I wasn't mean to them, hopefully, but I could have been better. I think that's a big, that's a worry where you're like, well, let's learn from that. I think there's 2 answers to this. At the macro, at the big level, the society level, we never will. And that's why it's in same as ever. It's been like this forever and always will, that everything is relative to other people. And look, if we were going to compare ourselves to a family 500 years ago who had 10 kids, 8 of whom died by age 2, whatever it would be, like, do we have less suffering today? Of course. No. But still, when we are comparing how well we're doing in our prosperity, it's always relative. I think at the individual level, it is possible for some people, much easier said than done, but possible to recognize the game that's being played. And to ask yourself, like, do you want to use money as a tool to give yourself a better life, or as a scorecard for other people to measure you by? And most of those people are not even paying attention to you to begin with. And that's a big part of it. Like, you wake up every morning running as fast as you can to impress strangers who are not even thinking about you. They're busy thinking about themselves. And so I think once you identify that game, then your social aspirations can decline. Not to zero. Like, everyone wants to look good and be fit in and fit in with their friends. But I think they can decline, and your willingness to show off really diminishes. I heard this great phrase recently, which was, a high-end Toyota is a nicer car than an entry-level BMW. Because a high-end Toyota is filled with things that make you happy. Nice seats, a good sound system, like moonroof, whatever it is. The entry-level BMW is just bragging rights. Other than that, I think you should go through life wanting the proverbial high-end Toyota. I think that it's not showing off for others. It's making you happy. Trying to put up your peacock feathers to show off to people. It has not made me happier. It's probably made me more content, which you might confuse with happiness, but it's very different. I don't think I'm happier in the sense that I don't wake up smiling more than I used to. but I think I probably have fewer anxious days than I used to. I say fewer because they still exist. So I think it has removed anxiety, but it has not improved happiness. I think that, for most people, is what money will do to them. Everyone's a little bit different, but I think that's actually a pretty common thing. It will remove anxiety, and it will reduce the number of bad days that you have. It's not going to increase the number of great days. Or if it does, it's minor, because people will become accustomed to the new house, the new car, whatnot. You're never going to get accustomed to like having bad days. Like the removal of that is always going to be a positive influence in your life, but it's different than happiness. Now, chasing contentment is worth chasing. It's a great thing. It's not to say money does nothing for you. Like it absolutely does, but contentness is not happiness. And so I feel like that's been for me. My wife and I have always been we found a lifestyle that worked for us. And we've gotten the goalpost to stop moving. Time with our kids, going for walks, going kayaking, and the social aspiration of like, oh, we need a bigger house, nicer car. It's like, it doesn't really appeal to us that much. So in that sense, nothing has changed, but that's by design. I think before the books came out, I would have said what I just said. Money's not going to make you happier. And then when you experience it, I think for me, it was like, wow, that's really true. That's incredible. And to say that to someone who is still aspiring to gain some sort of net worth, I think just as I did, it's like, even if you believe that, you're like, yeah, but. And I think experiencing it is like, wow, that's actually pretty amazing. The other thing that I had never experimented with that we just started to in any meaningful way is giving money away. Really, I'm kind of ashamed to say we really hadn't done in any meaningful sense until a year or two ago. And doing it it's interesting. It feels great. And if you think like, is buying myself a new watch, even a new car, is that going to increase my happiness? Maybe marginally. Is helping someone for whom this amount of money is meaningless to me changing to them? And then you just see like investing is all about like leverage and compounding. And you see the leverage of like 10 grand is going to do nothing for you, but 10 grand can utterly change this person's life. Then it's like, wow, that's a cool thing. And I think once you get to some level of material life, whatever it is, there, at least for, maybe not for everyone, but there is some, like, guilt's probably the wrong word, but it's just like, there's a lot of wrong going in the world. And like, do I need to like push up my ego a little more or help this person who really, really needs it? So that's another thing where 3 years ago, I would have said, oh, I bet that's the case. But then when you experience it, you're like, ooh, wow, that's interesting. There's two things. One, if you are honest about history, the world is very fragile. And there's if you look at history, it's a constant chain of surprise and setback and disappointment and recession and bear market and pandemic. Now, look, a ridiculous amount of progress baked in there. But that's not to say that I always think every 10 years the world breaks on average. Once every 10 years, there's some event where you wake up and you're like, the world is not the same as it used to be. Everything's different now. September 11th was that. COVID was that. And historically, it's about once every 10 years. And so when you have lived through a couple of those events, in my adult life, in your adult life, it's by and large been 9/11, the financial crisis, and COVID. Once you've lived through 2 or 3 of these events, I think it's very natural and healthy and accurate to say to yourself, the world is a dangerous place.